Okay, we're live.
Good morning or afternoon where you are. Ethan, how are you today?
I am excellent, thank you.
Awesome. Well, everyone, this is Ethan Leeds. He is my business partner and he is a holistic nutritional detox professional who has been working in health and wellness for over 30 years. And so he's super knowledgeable. I love talking to him about, everything health and wellness. But today we're actually going to talk about vitamin D. So, Ethan, like we've all been led to believe that we're vitamin D deficient. Like I know half of the country, especially if you live in like the northern states of the United States, they're like half the year you need to be supplementing with vitamin D. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Okay, so yeah, it's the case that we regularly get advice on health and nutrition that ends up being completely turned around in the future. Or, for example, if we go into the past and look at some of the advice that we've been given, we were told for many years that fat was bad for us and that we should all switch to a low-fat diet. I never did that because I can see that the actual science didn't say that, but lots and lots of people did and have suffered the consequences with all kinds of health issues as a consequence of low fat diets. So the current advice is U-turn. They're now no longer teaching that, although because we've had decades of that being taught, a lot of people haven't caught up that they've changed direction on that particular fact. That's just one of many, many examples where the advice that we're being given turned out to be false. So right now, they're telling us that we should supplement with vitamin D. So the first question that I like to look at when I'm being advised, I mean, well, is who is advising? Where's this coming from? And it's coming from big pharma. Okay, so that's where it's coming from. It's a $1 billion industry, the supplements of vitamin D, nearly all synthetic. So when something's coming from big pharma, that for me is a red flag. That means I need to pay attention and look at it a bit closer because they seem to make a lot of their recommendations based on profit or other agendas rather than actually in our best interest. So Big Pharma is behind the vitamin D recommendations, and that's flown right through to our natural health people as well. So many of our NDs and other natural health professionals have taken this on board a lot of the times with minimum to no research. Just like doctors prescribing the things they prescribe, they often know very, very little. They're just following a protocol. And the same thing happens in natural health. So the second red flag so I'm just before we get into any science, I'm just trying to lay the common sense stuff that anybody should be able to see. So the second red flag is if you decide, okay, well, so vitamin D is something that I need. So well, where can I get it naturally? Which foods is it in? You're going to find hardly any foods. Now, for something that they're telling us we desperately need and it's a major problem and that everyone's getting sick because they're low in vitamin D and so on, it doesn't quite add up when it's in hardly any foods, because if it was really that important, it should be in the foods the foods that are the human diet, right? And basically, I mean, if you're a vegan, you're in massive trouble. Although that would be true of a few other nutrients that we do actually need as well. But vegans are in huge trouble because D3, which is the one that is usually being talked about, rather than D2, which is in mushrooms and a few plants, but D3 is pretty much exclusively in animal products, not many, but like oily fish, cod, salmon, that kind of thing primarily. And of course, for people that don't live on the coast over the thousands of years that we've existed, or the whole of our history, they wouldn't have had access to those foods, despite many of them living in a northern hemisphere. So what did they do? How did they survive? How did they get their vitamin D? Well, the next red flag is the fact that one of the things that they do when they want to sell us something is they change the meaning of words and they repackage things, and they've done that with vitamin D because it's not a vitamin. So they call it vitamin D, or vitamin D for my UK friends. They call it vitamin D, and it's not a vitamin. It's actually a steroidal hormone. But if they said you need to supplement, Lindsay, with this steroidal hormone, you'd probably have a bit more resistance than if they said, hey, you're low in this vitamin. Because people are used to supplementing vitamins because they know that lots of nutrients that we need are deficient in our diet, and they just lump vitamin D in with that because it's called a vitamin when it's not. Okay, so if you're supplementing with D, you're actually supplementing with a steroidal hormone, which is a very powerful chemical in our bodies. Very, very, very powerful. So those are a few things that we can, without getting heavy into the science, I'm going to touch on the science as well, but without getting into the science too much, we can begin to see that there's some problems with this narrative that we're all deficient in hormone D, but being told we're deficient in vitamin D. And we can see that just from that little bit of backdrop that I've given there. Now, another thing that they do, and by the way, feel free to jump in anytime you want. But
No, this is super interesting. I feel like people need to know the background of it before, like you said, we dive into the science portion.
right, so one of the things that they do scientifically to deceive people is they use tests deceptively. So, for example, the PCR test has been
Mhm.
used to prove that people have something that they don't have in order to get them to take things that the pharmaceutical industry want them to take. That's an example. I could give many examples. The problem is many people won't realize that they're fake, and so they'll think, oh no, because that's correct. I could talk about testing for HIV to tell you that you're going to get AIDS, but a lot of people go, no, because if you have HIV, that is the thing that causes AIDS. Is it? Is it really? Maybe you need to dig a little bit on that. But anyway, so there's many tests that have been designed to elicit a response that's going to end up putting profits into the big pharma's coffers. So they test you, they tell you that you've got this problem, or you will have this problem if you don't take their solution, which might be a vaccine, or it might be a supplement, or it might be a drug, or whatever it may be. So they use tests really as a marketing tool, and that's why they love this whole idea of well, they do it with cancer and many things. Test, and if you find this gene, then that would mean that you need immediately to lock parts of your body off quickly because you're in serious danger or whatever. So they just love it. They love these tests and selling something that driving people into fear, so that they can then sell them a solution that no one was looking for until they did the test. Okay, so we need to be suspicious of tests. Okay, now
Yeah,
isn't
so what are they actually testing when they're testing the vitamin D levels?
right. Well, that is the $1 billion question. So people assume they are testing their D, that there's a level that we should be in, and that if we're outside of that level, then we haven't got enough D and we need to do something. That's what they assume.
Mm-hmm.
And that actually is not really the case. So D is a lot more complex than that. Um, and so I'm going to try and make this very simple because I find a lot of people just struggle if you get too sciencey. So, but there are other, if for those that want to go deeper, I can point you in directions to find the information, when you get really deep. But I'm going to just keep this simple. So you have effectively two main types of D in your body. Okay, you have what we can call active D. That's the stuff that's doing things in your body, that's actually stimulating your immune and doing all the stuff that we know D does. Okay, that's the active. And then we have inactive D, and that's not doing anything, no biological activity in your body at all. Okay, so that's the two types. Now, if we're going to measure our D, we should be measuring both of those two types, of course, to have a proper picture. That's not what happens. So if we're going to just measure one, then it should be the active one, the one that's
Right.
doing stuff, because that's the more important one. And also, that's not what they do. What they do is they measure only the inactive D, but that's not even the end of it. It's worse than that. They only measure two of the 14 plus components of the inactive D. So they're just looking at two substrates of D out of the 14 plus. There's more than 14, but we'll run with 14. There's 14 substrates plus. They're looking at two of them. And then they measure those two and give you that number like that's your D number. No, that's the two inactive substrates number. That just gives you a tiny little bit of picture.
Wow. That blows my mind right now. Like, seriously. So basically what you're saying is like 85, 90% of the vitamin D in your body is not even being measured. If you were
Well,
to
the
quantify.
percentage varies depending on different things, but yes, a huge percentage of your vitamin D, which is a hormone, is not being measured, and none of the most important D is being measured. And here's another thing that they do. So what they will do is they will let's say someone is sick. Let's say they've got the infamous COVID, which is even what is COVID, because there's not any proper diagnosis of what is COVID. But whatever. Anyway, let's say that you've got COVID, or you've got fibromyalgia, or whatever. You've got some chronic condition. So what they'll do is they will measure these two inactive substrates, and what they will find is that they're low, usually. So then they're going to say, you've got this health challenge, this COVID, this fibromyalgia, this whatever it may be, because you're low. And so what they're doing is something in science called correlation. So they have a correlation between two things, and they're claiming it to be cause and effect, which you can't do. Correlation does not mean it's the cause. You can't do that in science. You just can't. You can get ridiculous conclusions if you do that. So what they've done is they have a correlation. It is a truth that a lot of people who are sick have low inactive, those two substrates of inactive D is often low. That's the truth. But is it the cause of their sickness? That's what they want you to believe, and it's not the truth. That's not true. And we can know that by doing a better test of D. Because if we test the active D as well as the inactive D, what we usually find is that the D levels in the sick person are actually really high. The inactive D is low because they've made a lot of active D because they're sick. Right?
That makes a lot of sense. The D is part of the immunity, and the immune system is active at that point. And so you're seeing a lot more D. And the inactive is basically, you could look at it as that storage. Like it's storing in your body for when you need it. Well, when you have high inflammation and you're sick, you need it. And so there's not going to be a lot of storage, right?
Right. So the storage is being used, and you've got a lot of active, but they won't test your active. So they're taking the picture from a tiny slice. It's like having a jigsaw piece of a puzzle, and you haven't got the picture, and then you draw the picture based on that one piece. You can't do that. You need the picture. If you haven't got any of the other pieces, you've got no chance from one piece of the puzzle to figure everything. So you can make some guesses, and your guess might be correct, or it might not be. You need to look at the other pieces, and the other pieces in this case are the active D. We could also nice to know the other substrates that are inactive. All them would be used to test all of your D would be the ideal. And since it can be tested, it's not like it can't be tested. It can be. Now it's a little bit more expensive.
Yeah.
Well, so price is part of it. So the active D has a half-life of the inactive D. So it's there, but it's not there as long. So it's a smaller window you've got. It's a little bit more tricky, a little bit more expensive, but it's very doable. You can do it. They just don't like to do it. And again, I think I have to question the motives when there's a lot of money to be made if people are deficient. So we can't know what the motives are. We can only make guesses. I don't know, but what I do know is that you cannot know the picture without having the pieces of the puzzle. And by choosing to not look at the other pieces of the puzzle and try and make predictions and try and make claims based on a single piece is just ridiculous. So all these people who are being told they're deficient in D, they're usually high in D. Just the D that they're high in, they're not testing. So they're only testing a little piece that often is low when you're high in the other parts of the D. So you're not low at all, you're actually high.
That's
So
crazy. So what about like in the winter, they say that you're deficient because you're not getting out and getting enough sun. First of all, how much inactive D do you actually need to be not efficient or deficient? And then second, how much sun do you need to make sure that you're getting enough?
right, well, that's an interesting question about the levels because that's another thing they changed. It's another warning flag. So in 2010, they basically halved the levels. They went from something like 30 to 12.5 to say if you were below 30 now, so it was 12.5, then it went up to 30. So now, if whereas you would have been fine at 15, suddenly now you're deficient. You'd have been fine at 20, suddenly now you're classed as deficient. So that's one of the things they did. They changed the scale so that suddenly a lot of people that hadn't been classed as deficient up till 2010, suddenly they were all deficient because they just moved the scale. So it's one of the games that they play. So that's one thing. So a second thing is that so active D is not affected by the season. So your active D doesn't go down in the winter. Okay, so your inactive D, your 25, which is called 25D, is what they look at rather than 125D. So the 25D, which is the piece they look at, that is affected by the season and that will drop. But your active D isn't affected. Okay, so your active D will stay, all through the year. Now, do we need sun? Yes, we do. And if you have no sun at all, such as we did, there were people back in the 30s that were children in particular that were worked in factories non-stop, 7 days a week, like through the day when they should have been in the sun. They weren't getting any sun at all, and they started getting a disease you don't see anymore, which should be another red flag that, hey, if we're vitamin D deficient, what's happened to all the rickets that the kids in the 30s were getting when they had no sun? We don't see that in the US and in the UK and so on, which is the disease of D deficiency, rickets. So yeah, if you don't get any sun at all, if you really, or maybe you're sick and you're in hospital for years or something, you never get to see sunlight, and you can, of course, in that situation, you can use lamps, certain types of natural light lamps, which would replicate that, but which would be better than taking the synthetic D that they want you to take. But you actually don't need anywhere near as much sun as you think. So I mean, now I live in Brazil, so I get lots of sun. But I used to live in the UK, where we only see the sun for about 4 or 5 hours a year, or maybe sometimes 6 hours. But we don't see much sun in the UK, but it's enough. It's enough, and the sun in the summer, as long as you get out sometimes, your face and your hands is all you need. Of course, if you have a really lovely day and you take off your top and you're at the beach, that's great. But you don't need all that skin exposure. We can make enough D from fairly limited exposure, and then because the body stores it because it's a fat soluble hormone, so the body stores it. Then we can go all through the year. Our bodies are designed to do that. That's how humans have survived for all of history without supplementing with D, without a problem. Even the humans that live in the northern hemisphere, they've all survived and thrived without a problem. So they've created a problem, by telling us that we're sick because of a reason that we're not sick for, and then they're giving us the solution, which is really not a solution. It's a synthetic hormone that actually damages our body and suppresses our immune. So So that's another side to the coin.
So it's like doing the opposite of what they're saying it's doing, because they're telling us to take vitamin D to boost your immune system, but it's actually suppressing it.
It's actually suppressing it. It's in fact cholecalciferol, which is the form that they're mostly selling us, is the active ingredient in rat poison. And the way that it works in rats it does exactly the same in humans, but because we're bigger, it doesn't have quite such the strength of effect and actually kill us, although it can. And in fact, I was reading a report from one of the companies that make vitamin D, hormone D, just recently, and even the company that made it had as a possible side effect for humans death. And that was manufacturer. But what it does, it deregulates calcium, and so your D, when you supplement with D, your body needs to match that D with calcium in your blood. Okay, so if you've got lots of calcium, then it will use up that calcium store to match in the blood. But if you're low in calcium, and you can become low pretty quick if you're supplementing with high levels of D, then what happens is, then because your body has to match the D with calcium, it will start to steal calcium from your bones. Okay, and it's irrelevant whether you're taking K2 or whatever. That doesn't make any difference. It's going to steal the calcium from your bones, and so you're going to start to run into bone issues, osteoporosis, and all this kind of stuff, as your body is continually taking calcium to match the D that you're taking.
That worries me, because you see people with COVID being so scared about getting COVID that they're literally taking like 20,000, 50,000, 70,000, 100,000 IUs a day,
Yeah,
just
yeah,
because
it's
they feel
terrible.
like it will prevent them
Now, now
from
one of the things. So sometimes I'll get people say, "Hold on, I took D and I felt better."
Yeah, so
So,
what's up with that? Because I lived in Minnesota for my whole life, right? It's freezing
right,
out there half the year. You don't get a lot of sun because the time of day that you're awake, the sun isn't really out. If you have a 9 to 5 job, when you go to work in the morning, it's dark out. And when you get off work, it's dark at 4:30 p.m. So it's like you don't really get a lot of sun, and we're told that vitamin D does affect our mood, right? And so a lot of the times, like, there is seasonal depression and stuff up there, and I actually experienced that for myself and realized that when I moved to Texas, my body just felt a lot better. And for a long time, I thought it was because I wasn't getting enough vitamin D, and even supplementing with vitamin D, because I did that for many years because that's what I was told to do, didn't really help that much compared to like actually getting in the sun. And I know that the sun has a lot of other health benefits for you that increase your mood and really, help your health in general. So, what actually should we be looking for when we're thinking about, do I actually need to be taking vitamin D or
okay. So first of all, so sunshine is very, very healthy for us, and I've lived I lived in North Wales, where we had the same issue that you just described. So it would get dark in the winter around 3:30. It would be dark. I'm a bit of a night owl, so I would get up late. Oftentimes, I'd only have a few hours of light, and it wasn't, when I say light, it's kind of dingy grey light, for maybe 4 hours, and then it would be going dark for me. So I'm very, very familiar with the lack of light, and I definitely think many people are affected by that. It's not about vitamin D specifically. That's about light, sunlight. Sun. You just need to see the sunshine. If the clouds move out and the sun beams through, it lifts your spirit just immediately. Very often seeing this. So there's something about light. Our DNA contains light. I don't know if you know that, but light is very, very powerful, and so sunlight has many, many health benefits and getting enough sunlight definitely helps us in many, many ways, probably many that we don't even begin to understand. So I like to get as much sunlight as possible. And it's tough because we have lives where I have a life where I'm naturally indoors quite a lot. I'm on the computer, and so I have to make conscious decisions. Despite the fact I get masses of sunshine in Brazil, I have to decide I am going out while the sun's out to get some sunlight. I have to make those conscious decisions because it's so easy to not do that. And then if you're in a country as I was, where there is hardly any sun, you can't for large parts of the year. So getting sunlight is definitely a very, very good idea. And for those people that don't get enough light, you can use artificial, natural light things. And that helps some people with the seasonally affected disorder that you just described. But that's not about D. So
that's what we're told it's about. We're like brainwashed and told that
right.
we need to supplement with vitamin D because we're not feeling well, because we're in a bad mood and all this stuff. And they don't say anything about all the other benefits of sun and all the other components that sun has, and the infrared and everything that has an effect on your body. They literally just say, if you're feeling this way, you need to take vitamin D.
Right. And that's not that, but sunshine for sure helps, but it's we're not. Here's the way to know. Look, if somebody wants to know, hang on a minute, you're saying this, someone else is saying the other, I don't know what to believe. Here's the answer. Get your vitamin. I'm calling it vitamin just because that's what people know it as, but get your D125D tested. Find out if your actual active D, the stuff that's doing things in your body, is actually low. And unless you've got some sort of kidney disease or certain types of thyroid, parathyroid problems, you're going to have where you can't manufacture that D. Oh, and that's another thing. What's D made of? It's made of cholesterol. What are they telling us to get really low? Cholesterol. That's another of the lies that they tell us. So people with high cholesterol have much better all-cause mortality than people with low cholesterol. You're more likely to die with low cholesterol than high cholesterol. Cholesterol is your body's defense to inflammation, and it's what the sun uses to make D. So you need sufficient cholesterol. And if you've got high cholesterol, that's probably an indicator that you've got high inflammation and your body's defending you. So don't push your cholesterol down, push your inflammation down. Then your cholesterol will balance. But fighting cholesterol is absolutely the wrong way to go. And again, that's what they tell us we should do. Oh, cholesterol is the cause of this, that, and no, it's not. No, it's not. The inflammation is the problem. The cholesterol is the solution that your body is trying to defend you with.
Super interesting, right? Because they say LDL is the good cholesterol and HDL is the bad cholesterol. But what you're saying is there is no bad cholesterol.
Well, they say it the other way around. They say LDL is the bad cholesterol, but
sorry, I mixed that up.
Yeah, but yeah, no. So that both cholesterol is a very important thing in the human body. A huge part of our body is made up of cholesterol. Our cells, our brain, there's loads of cholesterol. We need cholesterol. It's so important that your body makes it. Right, so LDL is made by your body, and that's the one that has you have the higher amounts of is LDL, which is the one they say is bad. Your body is making it, and what they're saying is, well, your body is making this bad stuff. No, your body's not making bad. Your body's making it in response to an issue, right? And the issue, if it's high, and the issue is inflammation, and and the studies, like if you've got 1,000 people, half with high cholesterol, half with low cholesterol, they all have a heart attack. The low cholesterol ones are the ones that are going to be dying, not the high cholesterol ones. Okay, that's just a fact. So while we don't necessarily want really high cholesterol, we don't. If we've got high inflammation, we want it, and then we want to get our inflammation down, and then our cholesterol will naturally level. So as we fight inflammation, so they tell us the exact opposite of the truth over and over and over again. And this D is just another one of those things. And sadly, it's a thing that's been accepted by large numbers of the natural health world. So there's lots of so-called, well, they aren't. I say so-called, that's a bit unfair, but they are natural health professionals, but they've swallowed this lie. They've swallowed this lie, and they don't pay any. They mostly, these people, look. We don't have time to research everything. We don't. And most natural health professionals, they've got their areas that they're really good at, and there's things that they might know in great depth, but they don't know everything about everything. And so a lot of the time, they just receive wisdom on stuff. And this is one of those things that's been accepted without too much digging by a lot of people. And we really have to dig. Otherwise, we're just going to be prone to the same deception and same lies that that they're throwing out at us constantly. The misinformation and as I say, the big alarm bell is if it's coming from big pharma, it's probably not right.
My question to you, do you think that big pharma and like these tests and the science and everything, because you're when you do a test and you are looking at science and you have this theory, right? Like that cholesterol is a bad thing. And then you test it and somebody's cholesterol is high because they do have high inflammation, but you're not looking at the inflammation. You're looking at this one thing. So do you think it's like actually them trying to manipulate it, or do you think that they just don't understand how the body really works and what they should be looking for in the first place?
So it gets a bit tricky when you start trying to read motives into things, and I have my views on that, but it's not factual. Like, you can't say this is the reason that they're doing it, but you can draw conclusions from that amount of times that they get basic science wrong and do say the exact opposite of what it actually is. And when they do it over and over and over again, it starts to become more and more difficult to see it as accidental. Um, so my belief is that it's conscious at the top levels. As it comes down, then many of the doctors and practitioners, they're not doing it consciously. They've been deceived. But from the top, um, it's known. And one of the ways that they get the scientists and so on to contribute and play along is that they fund just about everything. That's done all the research and everything. Well, the money comes from them, and the money flows to the people that are in line with the agenda. So if you come up and you say something different, then you're going to not get the money at best, and at worst, you're gonna be marginalized, attacked, ridiculed, lose your job, and even worse stuff than that for those that are aware of things that go on. So they control everything. They have a monopoly. They've developed this monopoly over a long, long time. They've made it illegal to make claims about natural health products curing anything. You're not allowed to tell people that they go to natural things, plants and other stuff, and they find active ingredients that have a positive medicinal type effect, and then they produce a synthetic drug version, and then they make the natural thing illegal to make any claims about, while they say their patented drug, which has all sorts of side effects and doesn't work half as well as the plant. That's just the system that we're in. And so they're doing that with D. It's what they get D from irradiated lamb's wool or sheep's wool from the lanolin. That's what they do, and it's not in any way natural. It's not treated the same as the sun at all. It uses different pathways, and it's just different. It's just not doing the same thing. And that's before you even get into the fact that they're trying to replace the D that's inactive anyway. And does that even have an effect on your active D? That's something that needs more study. If you take the inactive version, is it actually being converted into the active D? That's a question that they should be looking at, which they're mostly not. So it's a mess. But I think people just need to, as I say, use their common sense and start thinking, well, how did people survive this long without this?
Right.
It's not in the food anyway, so you can't use the argument, which is a valid argument, that we need to supplement because it's no longer in the food. D was never in the food. Just a handful of food, so it was never in the food. So if we suddenly farmed correctly and we used the correct soil and we did everything perfect, D still wouldn't be there. So it's not, we see, we can't use the same argument that we might use for magnesium or chromium or vanadium or whatever. That has a validity to it. We do need to supplement now many things because it isn't in the food, but D is not one of those things. It's not a vitamin anyway. It's a hormone, and it isn't in the food pretty much anyway.
That's a good point, and it brings me to mineral deficiency, right? Because most people are mineral deficient, and we're getting our minerals from our soil, but we're not getting those anymore because of the farming industry. So you mentioned calcium being depleted. I also think calcium and magnesium, and they work together on, that same plane. Like, you need your calcium and magnesium. People are super deficient in magnesium. Do you think that this vitamin D and supplementing with that is causing magnesium deficiency as well as calcium?
Well, the prime cause of magnesium deficiency is that it's just not in the food anymore because the soil doesn't have it. That's
Right,
the prime cause. However, as it happens, D does deplete magnesium.
right.
Um, so yeah, if you're taking all these thousands of units of D, then you are depleting your magnesium. Worse than that, you're also, so here's the thing. So when you take these synthetic D supplements, so the inactive D, you're actually pushing you're pushing the active D out. So your active D that's doing a job, with the inactive D, you're taking up the receptors that your active D would have otherwise been utilizing because they compete. So you're blocking your active D from working by taking the inactive D. And it's worse than that because now that your active D has been pushed out of its natural receptors, it has to find a home, right? So it's going to go into other receptors that it fits that aren't actually meant for it. So what are the receptors that D fits that aren't meant for it? Where might we find them? Guess where we find them? In the thyroid. So active D that's been pushed out by the inactive D supplement is now going to end up competing with what? With T3 in the thyroid for the T3 receptors. So you've now got this battle between T3 and D, and guess which is going to win? D, because D has a greater affinity for T3's own receptor cells in the thyroid. So now you're going to get active D sitting in the receptor cells that should be for T3, and you're going to get thyroid disruption as a result. And we're seeing that happening.
So
I'm not
many
saying
problems right now, like hormonal imbalance, thyroid issues, hypothyroid, overactive thyroid, hypothyroid, Hashimoto's, and do you think that the thyroid also, because I know that the thyroid and hormones play a huge part in immunity and autoimmune conditions, and we're looking at so many autoimmune conditions on the rise too. So I'm not saying that vitamin D and supplementing with that is the main cause of this, but it's definitely not helping us to be, taking this when we're exposed to so many toxins on a daily basis and all that. And then we're just, like you said, suppressing our immunity and getting all these autoimmune things.
so. Here's the thing with autoimmune, and we touched earlier on people sometimes feeling better with D. So if you have an autoimmune disease, what they're calling an autoimmune disease, which is actually just symptoms of toxicity. So
Right.
you've
Because
been
we know
poisoned.
that the body doesn't attack itself. Like,
Right, right.
I hate that when they're like, yeah, the body is attacking itself because of A, B, or C. It's like, no, the body's being poisoned and reacting to toxins in the body.
Right,
But
and it's fighting those toxins.
live
Right.
for a different day.
Anyway, when you have so what's happening is your cells are toxic, and so your immunity is attacking those cells, but not the cells per se, but that they become a bag of toxins,
Yeah.
effectively. So you're fighting the toxins, which kind of is like attacking you, but it's not really attacking you. It's attacking the toxins. So the immune attacking toxins doesn't feel good. Okay, so one of the most famous symptoms of the immune attacking pathogens or whatever is fever. So fever is a result of the immune fighting something. Okay, does fever feel good? No, it doesn't. Is it good that it's doing it? Yes, it is. So it's a good thing it's doing it. It just doesn't feel good. Okay, now if it gets ridiculously high, it can be dangerous. So there comes a point when fever can be too far, but usually that's not for most people. In most situations, your body's just doing a job. It's fighting something. Okay. So what doctors do typically with autoimmune problems, what they're calling autoimmune, is they give drugs or steroids or something aimed at suppressing the immune, which they're claiming is the problem. It's not the problem, but it is giving symptoms. So if you suppress the immune with drugs, you will feel better. Just like if you suppress a fever, you will feel better. You stop the body fighting and healing itself, right? But you're going to feel better. So sometimes you can feel better, but actually you're worse off now than you were before. So not sometimes when we feel better, it doesn't mean that we are better. So the usual strategy for doctors to fight immune problems is to suppress it. Okay. And that does make people feel better. So D is the same. So it's going to suppress your immune, and depending on what's going on, that might make you feel better, just like any other steroid or drug that they're using to suppress the immune, right? You might feel better. It doesn't mean you are better. It means you're pushing the problem deeper into your body, and it's going to just reappear in some other way, in only usually a worse way, in a stronger way, and more difficult to reverse down the road. So we've got to be very careful when we judge stuff by, hey, we feel better. We have to understand a bit more about what's going on. But if that's our criteria, if we're going to judge on that, then your best bet is to go to the conventional doctors, and they will make you feel better with a constant flow of new drugs. And when you feel worse down the road, they will have another drug to help you feel better again. And that's their whole protocol of suppressing symptoms to make you feel better. And then when you feel worse down the road, they'll give you something else to suppress the symptoms. That's how they work. That's not how a holistic approach works. It's not a good way of going, but that's what D will do. So yes, many people may well feel better when they take high dose D. Doesn't mean that's a good thing.
Yeah, I agree. I just posted this thing on my page yesterday that said, Big Pharma doesn't create cures, it creates customers. Because you're a customer for life when you are dependent on Big Pharma. They're always going to have something for you for this symptom or that symptom. And really, it's just putting a band aid on it. And then you never get to the root cause. And then that's why so many people have so many autoimmune conditions that are correlated with each other or connected with each other. They start with one, and then all of a sudden they have all these different autoimmune, and they can't figure out like why I have 10 autoimmune conditions now. It's because you never addressed the root of the problem to begin with, which was toxicity, and then your body just keeps taking from other places and areas, and you get more toxic, and your body tries to clear out those toxins and attack those toxins, and you end up with all these different diseases. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, toxic, and then deficiency runs off the back of toxicity, because
Right.
when you're toxic, you by default become unable to metabolize nutrients properly. So you suddenly need 5 times more nutrients than a non-toxic person, because you can no longer properly absorb them. You can't get them into the cells. You can't use them. So usually you're deficient even before you're toxic. After you're toxic, you're like seriously deficient. So we need to address those two issues, and that, from a holistic point of view, that's what we do. We address toxicity and deficiency, and most stuff just goes away when you do that. Especially if you catch it early, it's much easier the earlier you catch things, before that the doctors have poisoned you with all their so-called solutions to suppress symptoms. So yeah, that's what we approach. And then we come back to the question: okay, what are we deficient in? And it's food. We should be getting stuff from food. If we're using supplements, which we now need to because of the poor quality of food, then it should be food-based supplements. Not synthetics, not crushed rocks and crushed metals. I mean, they literally put crushed metals in our food now, and even our baby food, telling us that they're minerals that we need, like iron. They put iron filings in our baby food. That you can literally pull out with a magnet, and they're telling us that that is nutrients for a human. No, no, it's not. We need iron. We don't need elemental iron in its metallic flipping state like that. That's toxic to our body. But that's how bad it's become. So we've got to find our nutrition in food and food supplements, not in the synthetics and the vast majority of supplements which come from big pharma. They're either synthetic or they're rocks and metals crushed up. So your calcium supplement from the health store is probably crushed up limestone. And most people instinctively know that crushing up and eating rock is probably not a good idea. But although they throw that thinking away when it comes to water, and they suddenly think that the bits of rock in the water are somehow healthy. But anyway, whatever. So we want organic minerals, not inorganic minerals. We do not do very well with inorganic minerals. As a general rule, we can absorb very, very little of it, and we want organic minerals, and we want food state vitamins as well, not synthetic. And as I say, D is not even a vitamin.
Wow, that's just all of that. Like, I feel like we've just been completely taught ass backwards on so many things. And the more things that I learn over the years, the more I just go back to everything is due to toxicity and deficiency. If you address those two things, then your body knows what to do. It knows how to heal itself and it does its own thing. And you don't have to, fight so many different things with so many different things. It's just what toxins do I have and how do I remove those? And I feel like a lot of us are so toxic with metals, and there's not a lot of things that can remove metals. When you look at
Well, another problem is that people are taught to detox wrong as well. So even if they get to this point and they realize they need to detox, you can literally kill yourself with detox if you don't
yeah,
do it correctly.
absolutely.
So there's ways to do it correctly, and there's ways to really damage your body. And one of the things that I often hear is somebody gets really, really sick as they're detoxing, and they'll be told, "Oh, that's great. That means it's working," which sounds a bit like the vaccine argument. They get vaccinated and they're really sick, and that means it's working. No, that means you're doing it wrong. You do not want to be making yourself sick. Okay, a mild headache, fair enough, but a lot of the times these people are like, no, they're getting really, really sick. So people have to be. No, we haven't got time. I think we've already been on over an hour now, so I don't want to get too much into it. But yeah, detox is critical, really, really important. We have to get the toxins out faster than they're going in, but we have to do it safely. Very, very important. We have to do it safely. And most people are going to need help with that to do that properly.
Absolutely. And we'll talk about that on a different live because we can talk about that all day, like what to use for what and how to detox and all these things. But if y'all have questions on detox, talk to me or Ethan. We both are specialists in detoxing and we both um, cured ourselves and people that we love and are close to using detox and deficient methods. So just reach out to me or him and we'll help you out with that for sure. Is there anything else you want to add about vitamin D before we hop off here?
No, I think we've covered a fair bit of ground. I hope that it's helped people to see things a little bit differently. What I would say is, look, you've got to do your own digging. I mean, hopefully, I've given you some things to look at. Maybe you didn't know about 125D, now you do. Maybe you didn't know that they were only testing two substrates of inactive D, now you do. So I just want people to start getting them thinking and questioning and doing their own research. And Because we just can't trust a lot of what we're being told about a lot of things.
Absolutely. So, speaking of research, right? It's like a lot of people don't really know where to go or how to research or how to find, really, good research, because a lot of these PubMed articles and stuff like that are saying that you should be supplementing with vitamin D. So, where do you think that people should go to actually verify what we've talked about today?
Well, the problem with researching from studies, if you don't know how to read studies, that's the problem. People don't know how to read studies, and they don't understand the difference between observational studies, which have correlation, and then cause and effect studies, which is what we really need to be looking at. So really, if you don't understand the difference between correlation and observational studies and cause and effect, you're going to struggle to actually look at data and interpret it. So then really you need to be listening to people who do understand, who can explain, as we've just done in this video, why the claims aren't matching up to the actual scientific evidence, because they make claims in studies all the time that just don't have any real basis in science. They oftentimes, the study that they'll make a claim in a headline of a study, and then you read the study and you think that study doesn't say that they've said
I
in the
feel
headline.
that
It's just
so
like
many times.
it,
Yeah.
it, 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 it doesn't say that. So yeah, you need to study the basics of science to understand these basic things. The big one is this thing about correlation not equating to cause. Correlation does not, just because. Okay, I'll give an example. Okay, I'm just going to make it up, but base it around reality. So there's lots of claims about a vegan diet. Okay, a vegan diet being healthier than the diet that all human civilizations have eaten throughout the history of time. They're saying vegan diet is healthier. Okay, so let's just say that they did a study and they looked at 1,000 vegans and 1,000 omnivores, and the 1,000 vegans, they looked at health outcomes, and let's say they did it over 10 years, so a good period of time. And then they found that the incidence of cancer was whatever percentage for vegans, and it was worse for the omnivores. Okay, so we've now got 1,000 people for 10 years, vegans and omnivores, and we see that the vegans have less of colon cancer or whatever. I'm making this up. Okay. So, can we conclude that the vegan diet is healthier in regards to colon cancer? And a lot of people would think, yes, we can, based on that study, and that wouldn't be the case. That's a correlation. It doesn't prove it was anything to do with the diet.
It's
So
only
let me,
one variable, right?
it's
Like you have,
one variable. So it could be, for example, that the vegans, part of the reason that they were vegan is because they're more health conscious. So it may be that on average, the vegans didn't do other unhealthy things either. So maybe they don't smoke, maybe they don't drink, maybe they exercise. There's a whole range of things that maybe the vegans are doing because that's part of their lifestyle, to the vegan lifestyle. That the 1,000 people who are omnivores were all maybe eating McDonald's and bacon and smoking and drinking and doing lots of bad things as part of their omnivore lifestyle. So it might be nothing to do with the meat or the animal product, it might be to do with other factors. So that's why we have to do a study where we have two groups that are identical apart from one variable. And then we know that variable is the thing that's affected it. Okay, so all of the studies that they claim vegan diets are healthier are all correlation studies. There's no cause and effect studies at all. We have no real scientific data to say that the vegan diet is healthier or even as healthy. There's none, right? So, but we're hearing all the time about a plant-based diet being healthier, all the time, and it's all based on correlation. And when you look at it, it's really weak correlation, really, really weak. And usually they also compare these vegans, plant eating diet, to people eating a really bad diet. Yes, it's an omnivore diet, but it's a really bad one. They don't compare it to healthy omnivore diets
Like grass-fed meat.
or eating grass-fed meat. They don't compare it to that. They find, it's compared to the standard American diet, which is a horrible diet, which is causing all kinds of problems. So, and then it's only marginally better in a few little areas. But they ignore all that and just claim it's healthy. They're getting less cancer than people getting massive amounts of cancer eating a terrible diet. Then the other thing that they ignore. So let's say that you're eating meat and you have this correlation between meat eaters and some poor health outcome. Is it the meat, or is it that they've poisoned the meat? It's another variable. So if we'd have done the study 100 years ago, when before they were poisoning the meat and factory farming it and injecting them with steroids and hormones and feeding them GMO and all the rest of it, would it have been the same outcome? Probably not, right? So again, they're not taking these variables, these factors into consideration. So they're blaming meat when actually they've poisoned the meat. They've put chemical preservatives on the meat. They've done all kinds of crap to the meat, and they ignore all of that and blame the meat or the milk or whatever it might be. So these are all correlation studies. They're correlating people that are eating this meat have this problem and ignoring all the other possible factors that might be playing into that. That's not proper science. You can't prove cause and effect from that. That correlation studies are okay in that if they're used to point to something to research deeper. So, oh, this is interesting. People eating meat, I've got this problem. Maybe I wonder if it's the meat. Let's study that. That's what a correlation study is useful for, right? To point to something that needs investigation. And then you investigate and find, is it the meat, or is it what they're doing to the meat, or is it the way that the meat's being cooked, or all the different possible variations, or is it maybe not the meat at all, and the meat eaters also tend to drink a lot of alcohol with their meat, and it's the alcohol or the smoking or
So
whatever
many
else.
different variables.
Yeah.
So stopping you there, who is like an expert that you would recommend people look to like a vitamin D expert?
So the guy that I believe is the most credible expert on D in the world is a guy called Jim Stevenson Jr. He's on Facebook. He's a big researcher and he doesn't get any benefit from sharing his information. He studied it for decades in depth, and he's not paid by anybody. He's got a regular job around that. He's got a science background as well, but he has incredible depth of knowledge on D. And if people want to look him up, I've done videos with him in the past. I've got videos, where I've talked with him on D. But he is an amazing researcher who thinks outside the box and looks at the actual science rather than what they're claiming the science is telling us. So I would definitely point to him on D.
Awesome, because like you said, you have to listen to people that actually do the science and understand the research. Rather, when we tell people to go research, if they don't understand what they're reading or what they're looking at, and they go and they put vitamin D into PubMed and they get, 500,000 articles on vitamin D, it's like, where do you even start? So
And you start by saying, "What's my D125?" I'm not just going to go by 2 of 14 substrates that are inactive as telling me what my D level is. I want to know my 125. That's your starting point.
who would you go to for that? Like a functional medicine doctor, probably?
There's labs that you can. Mostly doctors are reticent to do 125D. They're told not to, basically. So some doctors will do it, but it can be challenging to get a doctor. But you can go independently to labs who do these tests, and you can pay and get it done. So Jim Stevenson has a group, a Facebook group, and he's just actually done a thing where he's everyone that's tested for 125 and 25D, he's got their results in to find out what people's levels are. I think 88% of people who were low in 25D were fine or high in 125D. So these are people who would have been told that they're low in D and they're not, and in some cases they're high in D. I can't even remember the name of his group, but you can link it underneath or whatever. We can find it and link that. But that's very sciencey. So for those that are really
name, I remember when he said it on the live the other day. I was like, "You're like, I would never name my group that."
right, yeah. So this is for those that really have a good grasp of science. Then they're going to love his work. I've tried to make this extremely layman friendly, simple, what have you. Jim doesn't do that so much. He goes into the science, I love it. But it's not for everybody. So, but if you really want to get deep into the science, he's your guy.
All right, absolutely. Well, we'll definitely have to find his group and link it so people can go check him out. I know that a lot of health and wellness practitioners will be interested in the science part. Maybe not like everybody watching this that's just a civilian, but like if you're into health and wellness and you practice and you are prescribing vitamin D to people, you might want to look into the science.
For sure.
All right. Well, it's been amazing having you on. I always like chatting with you. I feel like you're one of the smartest people I know, and just really appreciate your time on this because I feel like this is super important. It's something that we're being told that we need to take a lot of when we probably don't even need to be taking any for the most part, and just getting out.
Definitely none, unless you're talking food like cod liver oil or eating salmon, and that's fine, but you shouldn't be taking the synthetic D at all.
Get out in the sun 10 to 15
Get out in
minutes.
the sun. Yeah. Get your feet on the ground. All the good healthy stuff.
Well, I am going to go throw my vitamin D away now.
All right. Well, God bless. Have a great day, and thank you everyone for that's watching this. And we'll try to continue bringing you good quality information.
Absolutely. Bye, everyone.
Bye bye.